All right, FieldTech Production Orders. This is an intuitive, automatic manufacturing order solution for Zoho, and it's going to be presented by James Converse, our Chief Solutions Architect here. My name is Jeremy. I do the marketing at ZBrains. I'm going to be running through the short deck before the presentation portion of this webinar. So, what is FieldTech? What problems does this production orders module solve? And our live demo, and then some Q&A time. That's the agenda for today. So FieldTech is a suite of apps built on Zoho Creator. It's made especially for field services, manufacturing, and technology and SaaS companies. You can use single apps or the whole FieldTech suite, depending on your need. And of course, we can customize FieldTech for you following an assessment phase. So here's some use cases. Have you ever been in this boat before? You don't really know which materials you're using for manufacturing are in stock. You don't have a standardized manufacturing processes documented for each work center. You waste valuable time manually calculating labor and overhead costs on work orders. So here's a solution. It's our FieldTech Production Orders module, and here's how that can help you. Number one, you can directly manage and report on work centers. Set standard instructions for each work center with standard labor costs and material amounts consumed. You can report on budget to actual labor and materials used. You can reserve materials automatically when a work order is released or when one is completed. That's known as back flushing. You can pull materials into a works in progress account or WIP account so they don't show in stock and the cost of your finished goods goes back into inventory. You can automate labor and overhead calculations. You can calculate the labor on a work order from a bill of materials or a router and calculate overhead percentages to apply to a work order. So now it's live demo time, and I will give the floor to James here.
Okay, so the way the work order module functions is that you have a router and a bill of materials. The router is your that's your steps, and the bill of materials is your list of components that it takes to make a finished item. So what happens here, you can make routers on the fly. I'll show you this part in a sec, but you would build your router, which is how you make something, okay? And you have multiple steps. You list your work center. This is where the work is being done within your production facility. So you might have one area for cutting. You might have some sort of milling or punching, painting, heat treat, things like that, or it could be based on a person doing something like your sewing department. Since you list all of these steps here, a one-liner for the task, and then a more detailed description of what you're doing. Over here on the right, you have operations per hour or hours per operations. So over here on the right-hand side, you have, on the left-hand side, you have your steps, okay, and where the work's being done, and then you have the task, and then hours per operation or operations per hour. So hours per operation is how many hours it takes to make one. Something like that would be like if you're making a motorcycle. And operations per hour would be like if you're making, widgets like, I don't know, like a shoe or something like that, where, you're saying how many the machine can make in 1 hour. And so you choose that there. And then this is the actual, like what you're doing, who's supposed to do it. That could be a person or a crew. And then how long it's supposed to take. So if it's operations per hour, it's how many you can do in an hour, and then the other way around would be how many per one. This queue time here is how long it takes to like tool up a machine or to prepare for a particular step, and this time extension is the number of hours here plus the queue time is your total. And so you do that for each of your steps, okay? And so that's in essence what your router is. Then you have a bill of materials here, which lists all of the parts that it takes to make up said item. So that's your finished good item that you're making, okay? And then you just list all of the components here and the quantity of each of those components here on the right. So those come together on a work order. I'm going to click on a work order here. Whenever you make a work order, you can make one for stock or you can make one from a sales order. So each sales order line item would become a work order. You can also make multiple work orders for a line item, like if somebody orders like 1,000 units and you're going to make 100 a month or something like that, so you can have multiple work orders for a sales order. So on a work order, you are listing the item that you're making. If it is from a sales order, great. If not, it would just say from stock. Looks like this one doesn't have a bill of materials selected, but that's okay. So you have your bill of materials and bill of materials edited. This is kind of like to save it as a new bill of materials if you were going to make changes on the fly. You have router and router editable. So again, this is to make a change in the routing details on the fly and save it back as a new one. This is if you want to have a picture of your item. A lot of these pull from the item file. So like the bill of materials, the router, the image, those all pull from the item file when you work order as defaults. And then here on the work order, let me see if I can find a better one to use. How about, let's see, we got this one. Still no steps today. Boy, I don't know what happened to all my data. Okay, a little bit better. Whenever you make a work order, it's gonna pull from the item that you're making and explode the router and also explode the bill of materials here. So if there's multiple steps, you'd have multiples listed. But what's great about these editable ones is that if you don't have routers or don't have a bill of materials to start, like many companies do who are using one of these systems for the first time, they can make these on the fly and then save it back to their library for later use. So what happens is these, the router and bill of materials explode, you save the work order, and then you would schedule the work order, which can be manual, meaning that you just drag and drop it using the Kanban view that Creator offers, or you can, currently we have a forward scheduling, which calculates the due date from the work order start date, and there's someone who asked us to build a backward scheduling, which is in progress, and that's where you calculate the work order required start date from the required ship date. So right now we're just doing forward scheduling, but we do have backward scheduling coming, and then there's always just the manual method here. I'll show you that one real quick. So let's just put the work order. Oh, we got a status there. I don't know if any of these have a status. There we go. So this is just drag and drop. You can color code these as well, but you might color code them based on priority or something like that. But in essence, you can just drag and drop them there to schedule them. So that's the manual scheduling. But if you wanted to calculate, the due date, you'd have to use the forward scheduling method. So that's the basics on a work order. And then work orders get completed. What happens there is that you enter the quantity that you're completing. And so you can have several completions. You might do a completion each day. I'll go ahead and pick something there. And so this is what puts your finished goods into stock. In essence, it's just taking what's on the work order and multiplying times the quantity you're completing and showing you the quantity remaining to be completed on that work order. So it's going to consume this material. Looks like I don't have a quantity on that one in that bill of materials, but that's okay. So it's going to consume that material and then put the 10 of the finished good into stock. So all this goes into the inventory stock levels. Now you can manually pick things and issue them to a work order, individual materials. Most companies do that if they don't have a bill of materials or if they're required to mark every time they take something off the shelf. The manual method is pretty tedious, but there's some industries that require it. So that's pretty much it on a work order. In terms of how inventory is affected, some of you may have attended the MRP demo, but I'm gonna just recap that to show you a little bit because it has to do more with work orders as well. So I'm gonna show you a little bit better of a demo environment for just the MRP. So the biggest differences between a typical reorder report and an MRP is that one, an MRP is date sensitive. It uses the dates that are the purchase order date, the required receipt date or estimated receipt date, the required ship date, and when your inventory is going to become available. So that's based off of work order completion dates. The other thing about an MRP report versus like a standard reorder report is that the MRP report blows through all of the levels of your bill of materials and the sub-assemblies, right, to tell you if there is a bill of materials that you need to order the materials and not the finished good item. Okay. So in this MRP report, it starts with a date and says, as of this date, this warehouse is empty, but there are other warehouses at the bottom there. So it's based on the location, the warehouse location, and then it's also date sensitive. The action quantity is how many it is telling you to order. Items here are the material items and not the finished good items. So if it's a material item, you can cut a purchase order by selecting which items and say make PO. And maybe you don't like that quantity, you can actually edit quantities before you make the PO. So if you wanted to edit the action quantity there, you can change that. You can also do this in spreadsheet form. This is just kind of standard Zoho Creator, but you can do this in spreadsheet form where you can copy and paste. So if you wanted to copy and paste that like that, you could do that. Then go back there. So you don't have to just use the action quantity that it's recommending. You can edit that quantity before you actually cut that PO. So that's for material items. We can also release work orders for finished good items with a similar button. And when you're looking at the MRP report, this forecasted consumption, see if it's something you make, it means that, oh, okay, it's going to be used in a work order, so that's why I need it. Versus a finished good item, it's something more that you sell, right? So that's what it means by consumption. It really doesn't care whether it's a work order that it's going to be used or if it's a sales order that you're going to ship something out on. So we have a couple different methods in terms of how it recommends. One method is a forecast. We have a place for you to input a forecast by product. We can get that forecast from sales opportunities in the CRM, and you would have a subform to list the products there. Or you can associate a quote in your CRM, and we can just get the probability from CRM and multiply that probability times the associated quote line items to produce a weighted quantity. That's one method of forecast. And then the other method is you can just input a forecast by item, and you can associate that to a customer or not. You can just put in a date and an item and a quantity too. Third method outside of forecast is typically used when you have a bill of materials that use a lot of the same parts over and over. So if you buy like a blank item and you're going to like color it or dye it or do something to it, but you use the same core item in many different SKUs and different finished good items. So for something like that, you would use a reorder method. And let me show you that. So that method, we use a reorder point. This is commonly called an EOQ or economic order quantity. We just called it a reorder point because no one knows what the heck an EOQ is. So you have the reorder point and then the reorder point, the reorder quantity. So this would say if I dip on or below 100 to place an order for X, the reorder quantity. And so every time your quantity on hand dips below that, on or below that, it's going to say, hey, it's going to queue up an order for 500. So where do we get this reorder quantity? Well, you could input it manually. The other way that we can get that, we have a couple of different algorithms there. We have like a trailing X number of months, okay? And the other is more like a seasonal algorithm. So that the trailing would be like more of a flat demand. And then the seasonal would be like the same time last year. We can also apply a safety stock percentage to that number, to that algorithm. Let's see, I don't have that in here. So you can just add an X percentage of safety stock, or if it's like a growth year or something like that, you can add a percentage of growth. So those are the two methods we support. One is the reorder method, and two is the forecast method. And then within the reorder method, you have a couple of different algorithms that you can run. So back on the MRP, there are really two actions for an item. One is a purchase orders you select, and the other is a work order. I don't have that button displayed here, but in essence, it's just creating transactions in your ERP system. So if it's a make item, meaning it's an item that you make in-house, it's gonna want to release a work order. And if it's a buy item, something you purchase, whether it's a finished good or material, it's going to want to make a purchase order. So this is how you make transactions in bulk, and then the other version that I showed you earlier, where there was a work order that was made from a sales order. That's if you're like more of a build to order type of a company, and there you would actually have a sales order where you're converting to a work order. I think that's pretty much it for the work order module, and the MR kind of is associated to the work order module. I'm going to take some time for questions now.
Great. Well, James, I have one right off the bat here. CRM quotes are pretty terrible. We're using books and the estimates in there. Can we link those the same way?
Yes. Well, we replace those. So we would want to get rid of CRM quotes and get rid of books quotes and just use the FieldTech quoting system. There are different reasons for that. Roll-up fields. We have a quote configurator where you can have dependent lookups. You don't have to have a million SKUs in your list, right? You can do dependent lookups and store them separately so that you can have a true product configurator. Templates, associating the routers on the items, and project templates if you're more of a job shop. So there are a lot of reasons. The way the quote looks, electronic delivery, there's just a ton of different reasons why we want to use our own quoting system rather than the standard ones offered by CRM and Finance. I was asked another question on a demo I did yesterday, which is about barcode scanning and employee badge scanning and weighing like on a scale. So the scanning, you can have a scanner, and you can have tablets, and there are like pre-formatted forms basically in Zoho Creator that can render barcodes, or you can print them out on a piece of paper, or you can label bins and scan bins. So there's a way to do that in Zoho Creator. With employees, you can scan a badge, or everyone can just have their own device. What you can't do with employees, like I can't do anything where they like hit a thumbprint and it knows who they are. So they have to scan something. And then the other thing that is in progress is being able to weigh products for shipping or manufacturing, like catch weights, whether that's some sort of variable weight per batch. So we're working on a way to connect a scale with FieldTech. It'll probably be like a certain scale that you have to use to connect, but in essence, we're connecting a Bluetooth device using an IoT platform. That's something that has been asked many times over between physical devices, like connecting any physical device, whether it's maybe it's one of your machines, or maybe it's a scale, or maybe it's a printer. So those are all things that you might want to connect to FieldTech. And then the scanning thing is the other really common question. Scanning parts, scanning for people to track labor.
Okay. If you need to change the production system, can you reschedule a batch of work orders?
So that's a good question. So once you have a due date on something and it's been scheduled, okay, you can unschedule it and then reschedule it, and it's going to make a new due date, okay? But if you want to push out all the other ones too, and that you have to do on your own and change the due dates on them manually. But you can reschedule things, but if you want to auto schedule, you have to unschedule and then reschedule. And it's probably going to put them at the end of the line in that case. If it's like maybe it's a change order and now it's a bigger job than it was before, yeah, it's probably going to put them at the end of the line at that point. So it's not rescheduling once you have your schedule set is pretty tricky. So that being said, you might just use the manual method for scheduling, just the drag and drop on the Kanban, because it's once you set that schedule, it's really hard to work stuff in the middle of that. The other thing you could do is that don't schedule 100% of your capacity. You could schedule 75% of it and leave the other 25% open for rush orders or mistakes. So why else work with ZBrains? We help with all things Zoho. Our core here is CRM, finance, and Creator, mostly around operations part of Creator, or I should say Creator for operations department within your organization. We deploy, provide training. We're all U.S. based here in Southern California. We do have salespeople that are spread about the U.S., but production is here in SoCal. Our assessment phase is typically how we get started. That ensures your system, your project is feasible and how the applications are going to work together. So we produce a data flow model, do a feasibility study, do business process analysis, gap analysis, all that good stuff. And that's kind of how you get started with us if you are interested. You can get an assessment today. You could schedule that if you go to fieldtech.io/step1, spelled out, O-N-E. And I want to say thank you, everybody, for attending. We do appreciate your time on this Friday, and have a great weekend.